Good morning, everybody. Boker Tov. It's good to see everybody here. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today's shir. This shirim for the whole year, academic year, is sponsored Leilu Nishmas Brana Bas Brandit and Zelig Ben Kalman Zichronam Livrocha. And we have an additional sponsor for today's shir. Today's shir is sponsored by Harry and Linda Bruckner in memory of Harry's late mother, Bluma Bat Chaim Dov Alea Shalom, on the occasion of her Yortzeit. Are the Bruckners here? Ah, excellent. Good. Yes, fine. Excellent. That makes sense. Thank you very much for the sponsorship. Should be an aliyah for neshama, please God. We should learn some good Torah together. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, if I could ask you to turn off your phones, please. That would be great. Second of all, my understanding from the OU is that we will be ending the summer series 3 weeks from now. So I will be giving shir today, please God, next week and the following week. So there's 3 more, including today. And then we break for the summer, and we resume hopefully at the beginning of September, which will start with a new series. So my plan, I promised you some shirim on Shabbat, on the issues of Shabbat that we haven't dealt with before, and some shirim dealing with medical ethics. So since we have 3 left this summer, we'll spend those 3 on Shabbat focus, and then we'll start a new series, please God, in September, dealing with the medical ethics issues. There's lots of new ones we haven't talked about. In fact, I was just counting up before. We've managed, thank God, to do around 350 shirim since this series started originally. A few of them we've revisited from time to time and updated, but I try to find you new material. There's no shortage of halacha. We could do 3,000 shirim, and there'd still be halachic issues to discuss. Whether they'd be interesting to everybody to discuss is a good question, but you'll never run out of halacha. Today, I wanted to look at an issue which we've never dealt with before and review some of the halachot in this area leading up to next week, which I think will be much more cutting edge, if you like. Next week, I want to deal with the issue of timers and using timers on Shabbat and the parameters of how that works, and there's a lot of new issues there. But I want to get into that topic by talking about dishwashers. Now, I'm sure lots of people in this room have a dishwasher. For many years living in Israel, we did not have a dishwasher in our family. My wife had what I call an ish washer, which was me, okay? And I washed the dishes and beeped when needed. But Baruch Hashem, Jewish people like Hachnasas Orchim. It's a mitzvah d'oraita v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, and we do it, thank God, very well, especially on Shabbat. But one of the results of that mitzvah is piles and piles and piles of dishes in kitchens. And whilst I think that maybe 100 years ago or so, many people lived in houses where there was a maid living downstairs in a kitchen which was far out of sight, I'm sure that not many people here have that set up today. And therefore our kitchens are right in the middle of our house. Sometimes they're even open plans, so all the dishes and all the pots and all the pans can be seen and often can be smelt all the way around the house. So how do we deal with this on Shabbat? There are basically 3 ways of dealing with it. One is to wash them up yourself, and we'll talk about that now. A second one is to have some kind of a home help, which I want to revisit today. We've never really talked about Amirul Akum, asking non-Jewish people, housekeepers, cleaners, etc., to do things for you on Shabbat. Many people have that, and there are a lot of misconceptions about what you can and what you can't do. We'll talk about that. And another option which some people have suggested over the last few decades really is, what about a dishwasher? Let's have a dishwasher on a timer, stack up the dishes on Friday night, have it go on at 3 o'clock in the morning. No one's going to hear it. Everybody's fast asleep. You wake up in the morning and, hey presto, you've got a beautiful set of clean dishes ready to go for Shabbat lunch. So we will look at that more next week. We'll a tiny little bit this week. But this will open up all sorts of other issues which go way beyond that. Today people are much more into their morning coffee. And they can't just have an instant coffee. Forget about when it was only elites or bots or whatever people used to drink. Now it's not enough to even have a red mug or gold blend. You have to have your Nespresso machine all set up, ready to in the morning to do its thing. And you want to wake up to steaming, beautiful hot coffee. What about that? Can you do that? Can you set that up as well? We'll talk about that more next week. So let's get into the details here. Interestingly, the Gemara actually addresses directly the problem of dirty dishes on Shabbat. Let's have a look at number 1. The Gemara starts as follows. Tana Rabbanan. Ka'arod she'achal behem aravit. Plates that you used for Friday night dinner. Madichin, you can wash them. Le'echol behem shacharis, to use them for Shabbos morning. Shacharis, dishes, plates that you used on Shabbos morning. Madichin, you can wash them up again. Le'echol behem sabat, to use them in the afternoon. But Saharayim and Shabbos plates that you used in the afternoon, mincha, you can use them for Shalas Sudas. People used to clearly have lots of different meals through the day, clearly. Mina mincha ve'elech, but once it's Shabbos afternoon, it's really mincha time, and afterwards, shuv einu mediach. You can't be washing any dishes. Why not? Because you're washing them for Motzei Shabbos. Obviously, you're not going to use them again. That's very clear. Just look for a second at number 3. Shuv einu madichin, Rashi says, de'ein hadacha zo ela l'chol. Because it's obvious that you're washing up those dishes to save time on Saturday night. That you can't do. Fine. But during Shabbos you can. Back to number 1 in the second line. Aval kosot, but cups. The kitoniyot, like ladles and things that you use, sluchiyot, little flasks, jugs, the poskim say things that you use a lot through Shabbos constantly, teacups, cake plates, cake forks, teaspoons, things like that are constantly being used. You can wash those up, you can wash those dishes all the way through the day without any concern. Because there's no limit to how many cups of tea people like to have on Shabbat. I think as an Englishman, I relate to this. We know, by the way, we can tell if we've had English guests for Shabbos, because at the end of a regular Shabbos without English guests, our Shabbos urn is like down a third. And with English guests, it's almost right at the very, very bottom, because they're just drinking tea the entire day long. Okay? So those kind of things you can wash all through Shabbos. This is in fact not just a Gemara, but it's based on a Mishnah, even earlier, number 2. Meitziin et hamitot, you can make the bed. Mileile Shabbos l'Shabbos, on Friday night, when you wake up in the morning on Shabbos morning, you can make your bed and make your room nice because you're doing it for a shluff on Shabbos afternoon. Avaloi mishabbos leMotzei Shabbos, but you can't make your bed on Shabbos afternoon because you're only doing it for Motzei Shabbos. Now we'll see there are exceptions to these rules, but that's the basic parameters. The Rambam paskins this, but he adds one word which throws everybody into a bit of a tiz. Have a look at number 4. Says the Rambam, V'asur lahadiach karot v'al fasim. So ilfasim, you are allowed. Sorry, you're not allowed to wash plates. And ilfas is like a pan. Because that's metaken. Now, where did he get that from? Metaken usually is a malacha. Metaken is where you're fixing things which are broken. Fixing a watch that's broken, fixing a chain that's broken. In what way are you fixing plates by just washing them, etc.? So we're going to come back to that word. It's a word that he threw in there, which has changed the parameters a little bit. So you can wash you can't wash those things normally. Unless you're washing them for later that Shabbat, like we saw in the Gemara. Klei shtia, but things that you use for cups of tea, etc., drinking, kagon kosot, ketoniyot, basically, he paskined exactly like the Gemara said. Plates and pans and things, no, unless you're using them later at Shabbat. But cups all the way through Shabbat, yes. But he threw in this word of tikkun. Now, many of them Mephoshim immediately say, no, don't get excited. Tikkun doesn't really mean what tikkun normally means here. Look in number 5, the Magid Mishnah on the Rambam says, the Af Rabbeinu Zal, Kach Hu Savur. He also holds this principle, shetikun zeh ein asa ela mipnei shehu letzorich hachol. When the Rambam says tikkun here, it doesn't mean what we normally mean by tikkun. Tikkun normally means something technical. You're fixing it up in some way, which is a malacha. No. He's just using the word tikkun here. He really is just talking about the same thing as everybody else, of doing it on Shabbos for preparation for chol, which is called hachana. You're not allowed to prep for chol. But we'll see, not everybody is going to agree with that. The Ravad adds in another criteria. Go over the page to page 2. Says the Ravad on the Rambam, Ama Avram, Kol ze eino asur ela mipnei shehu TORAH l'chol. The problem here is not specifically preparing for the weekday, but doing something which is a tircha. Doing something which is annoying, takes a long time, which is an effort, which is distracting. Does that mean that, and many of the poskim talk about this, a very small action? For example, the big question, when you brush your teeth on Shabbos morning, can you wash off your toothbrush before you put it back in the pot? Because you're only going to use it on Motzei Shabbos. Now you might turn around and say, well, how could I put a dirty toothbrush back? It just offends me on Shabbos. Okay, fine, so that's your answer. It's ruining your Shabbos to have this sticky toothbrush there. But even if you say, no, I'm not that bothered, but is the act of just is that called a tircha? Or is that just an act? Yeah.
Same goes for dishes, dirty dishes. If you cannot bear.
Yeah, we'll get there. Wait, we'll get there. So it could be, before we even get to that point, which we're going to get to in a few minutes, maybe it's only something which is a real tircha. Now, okay, washing all the dishes when everyone goes home on Friday night actually is quite a tircha. So it takes half an hour and it's a lot of work and I'm tired and I want to go to bed. But okay, I'm doing it for Shabbos morning, that's mutter. But what about an action which is a very small action? Maybe it's not a problem. So we'll see. The halachic psak in number 7. Shulchan Aruch. Madichin keilin l'tzorech hayom. You can wash vessels for that day. Kegoin. Shenishar lo adayin suda. You've got another suda left le'echol. Another suda on Shabbos. That's why you're washing the dishes. Havala achas suda shlishid. Ein madichin. After Shabbos sudas you can't wash them. Like we said before. Now, the Mishnah Berurah clarifies in number 8. When we said Suda Shlishit, there's nothing magic about Suda Shlishit. He said, that's the stam situation. Normally speaking, people don't use their kalim again after Suda Shlishit. He said, but of course, if you know for a fact on Shabbos morning that you're not going to need this dish for the rest of Shabbos, then of course you can't wash it. And if you know for a fact after Suda Shlishit that you are going to need this dish on Shabbos, of course you can wash it. So he said the Shalos Sudas is just the stam case. It's the usual presumption. After Suda Shlishit, most people don't start with busying with food. So he says, but don't get too fixated on that. It really is just a question of facts. But then in number 9, he throws in something that not all poskim agree with. Shmir Shabbos agrees with it, but not all poskim do, but many do. Number 9, he says as follows. When we say we can wash up plates for Shabbos, he says, afilu eser kosod. Now he's talking about the cups. You can even wash 10 cups. Even if you only think you need 1 cup. Rashai la'adiach kulam, you can wash them all up. The hoil v'roi la kol echad. Since every single cup could be the cup that you need, that you want. Hutru kulam, then the halacha says you can wash all of them. You don't have to be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know how many people are coming later. Maybe there are 5 people coming, so I'll wash 5 cups up. No. Don't drive yourself crazy. You need cups. Wash all the cups that there are. Any of them could be used. For who adin shemetziin yud mitais. Okay, so too you can make 10 beds. How many people have you got staying for Shabbos? Like, a busy house. Okay, you're running a little hotel there for all the family. But it's interesting. Some of the poskim say, okay, that's fine with cups, because we just said that with cups you never know how many cups you're going to need. People drink more and more. What about plates and knives and forks? Many poskim say, no, you can do this as well with them. Meaning, let's say I have 5 people for lunch on Shabbos morning, and on Friday night I had 10 people, and I got 10 dirty plates in the sink. I can wash 10 plates. Well, I'm already washing the 5 that I need for Shabbos morning, so maybe I'll need more. Maybe I'll use this one, not this one. Maybe I'll use that one, not that one. I don't have to be thinking already, even when it comes to things beyond cups. Many poskim say that you have that heter, you can wash more, even though you think you only might need less. Obviously, if you know for a fact it's not possible that I'm going to use this, no. But you don't often know for a fact. What about washing up dishes when you know you've got other clean ones in the cupboard? That's a very relevant issue. Let's say I have 20 plates, and I use 10 on Friday night, and I have 10 people on Shabbos lunch. So should I just leave the 10 dirty ones there and use 10 clean ones because I've got 10 more clean ones? Or can I wash up the dirty ones because I do need 10 plates? And do I need to use the other ones? Maybe I don't need to use the other ones. And most poskim actually say, not everybody agrees, and I brought you in the footnotes those who don't, that yes, even if you've got clean plates and knives and forks in the cupboard, if you're washing for Shabbos, you can wash for Shabbos because at the end of the day, I'm washing these plates for Shabbos. I'm not washing them for Chol. So what that I have more clean stuff in the cupboard? For whatever reason, I don't want to use that. I want to use these. And many poskim say that's okay as well. Again, some say, no, come on. The only reason that you're using these is because, you don't want to have to wash them up on Motzei Shabbos. But others say, no, you could rely on that. Okay, fine. I think so far, nothing too controversial, pretty straightforward, just a short review. But then we get to your point, yes. One more point, yeah.
Dishes that you only use on Shabbat.
Yes.
And during the week, you have a different set of dishes. In other words, these are just Shabbat dishes. You wash them, put them away.
Yes.
For next Shabbat.
There is, that's a very good point. There is one opinion that says, when it says you can wash on Shabbos for Shabbos, but not for weekday, maybe that even means next Shabbos. Are you allowed to prepare on this Shabbos for next Shabbos? So that's a very good point, and there are a very few poskim who agree with that, but not many. You're one of them, okay, fine. I suggest you bounce that question off your LOR and see how that works. But I brought you on the sheet something about that as well. But now we get to your first point, which is, okay, Rabbi, I don't need these plates. I'm not having a big Shabbos afternoon, guest list. But they look at them; they're all over the place. My kitchen looks like a mess. They get smelly. They might attract flies, especially in the summer. I don't like living with all these dirty plates here. So I'm not really doing it for Motzei Shabbos. I'm doing it for Shabbos. But does it help on Motzei Shabbos? Yeah, sure, it helps on Motzei Shabbos as well. But I'm doing it for both, maybe. Mainly for Shabbos, but maybe for both. So the Aruch HaShulchan says as follows, number 10. He picks up your point. When he says, the Aruch HaShulchan says, when we're talking so far about the halacha, okay, when it says you can't make up the bed on Shabbos morning, Shabbos LaMotzei Shabbos, from Shabbos morning to use at nighttime on Motzei Shabbos, near the it's when you have a bedroom suite somewhere a long way away. You know, the bed, you're not going to even go in the bedroom for the rest of Shabbos, so why do you need to make the bed? You're not even going to walk in there. So what if it's a mess? Just shut the door and ignore it. And people are not going to go there, kol hayom, all day long. But where we live, he lived in Nevarduk. He was in a relatively modest house. I don't think he probably had a very big one. For us, a bedroom. I don't think he's living with mattresses in the middle of the living room. But he says the bedroom is just a bedroom off the house. Have a maguna. If I don't clean things up, then it's maguna. It's like not nice. It's off-putting and it's dirty and it's messy and it interferes with. I am going in and out of there. Then he says mutal hatzim. Then you can make the beds. Mishum noi habayit, because having a neat house on Shabbos is an onik Shabbos. That's part of your onik Shabbos. Ubefrat lekovod Shabbos, and it's part of your kovod Shabbos. Who wants lichvod Shabbos to have a house that looks like a hurricane just went through it? And this is what everybody does, he says. Everybody who is house proud washes their dishes, sets their beds. He's not talking about dishes, he's talking about beds, but it's the same thing. And I'll throw another bone in. And I'm going to go with this Rambam that put in the word mataken. He says the problem is mataken. And others said, no, he just means regular preparation. He goes, no, mataken's mataken. And with our beds, loy mikra mataken, meaning I don't know what the Rambam's doing with his bed, which is like fancy to the point that it's like mataken, but I'm not doing that with my bed. I'm just throwing a sheet over, putting the pillow straight, and whatever you think mataken is, it's not this. So he throws in this other idea that if you are, maybe we're talking about a higher level of fixing something up. Now, I don't exactly know what this means when you wash a plate. I don't know if there's a platinum level washing plates and like regular level washing plates. Maybe it depends. Maybe there are certain types of dish, preparation that's like really mataken, scrubbing it. I don't know. For me, I just know the regular way to wash dishes. They say the difference between men and women, if men are not surrounded by, is they both wash the dishes, but women washes the dishes after they use them, and men wash the dishes before they use them. That's the difference between men and women. Certainly with students. But if that's the case, which I'm not sure it is, I'm very happy to be in the women's side of things. I like washing the dishes. You can ask my wife. Of course, this is relevant, this Aruch HaShulchan. If it's going to be hot, it's going to be smelly, not just messy, etc., etc. What about just soaking the dishes? Okay, so I don't have to wash them all. I could just soak them in water and then they'll be okay. So again, that depends. If having them soaking in water is also off-putting and messy, then wash them. If soaking does the trick and that's all you need, then that's fine as well. What about things that are muksa? And that's actually quite commonly the case. For example, let's say you serve Friday night dinner and you use your pot, your soup pot that you cook the soup on. So a soup pot, now if you have a nice, what do they call those things, a tureen? A tureen. If you have a nice tureen, like my grandmother used to have, then that's not a cooking pot that you serve. But do anyone still use those anymore? I don't know anyone who uses those. Fancy people. Yes, okay, fine. Okay, fine. So I confess, we bring the soup pot. It's a nice aluminum pot. We bring it to the table. We serve it up. Fine. That soup pot is muksa. Why is it muksa? Because its primary purpose is a cooking pot. It's not primary purpose as a serving pot. So what's my heter to move it around? So when the soup's inside it, then it's not muksa because the pot is bottle. It's secondary to the soup, and the soup is clearly not muksa. The soup is for Shabbos. But when the pot is empty, sitting there on the side, ready to be, washed, then it's muksa.
table.
Okay, good. So the question is, how can I move it? And the answer is very straightforward. The muksa designation of a cooking pot is a relatively low-level muksa. It's the same as a pen. It's a keli shemalachta le'issa. It's a kli that it's human-made. It's not like something like a rock or a leaf or an animal which has got no preparation at all in human terms. It's something which has been prepared. It's a kli. It's just a kli that I use for a prohibited purpose which I can't do on Shabbos, for cooking. The din of a kli shemalachta issa is you're always allowed to move it in a normal way if either it's in the way or it's you need to do something to it or use it for some permitted purpose. Classic example is, I have no spoons to stir my tea. I need a pencil to stir my tea. I wouldn't do that, but a little pen or something like that. Then you could do that because you're using it for itself. So the cooking pot is muksa. Yeah, sure, it's muksa, but I'm allowed to move it because it's in the way. It's sitting on my table. I'm allowed to wash it because if I'm washing it up because I want the place to look tidy, I need to move it in order to wash it. I need it for itself, a permissible purpose, and therefore you'll be allowed to move it. Yes, sir. Like what? Well, then it's not muksa. You're using it as it's bottled to the pots. By the way, the same is your heter with the dishwasher. We're going to get to the dishwasher in a minute. A lot of people like putting their dirty plates in the dishwasher. They basically use it as a cupboard. They're not going to use the dishwasher as to run it on Shabbos, but they're using it as a cupboard, out of sight, out of mind. It's great. So people stick their stuff in the dishwasher, and then later on they run it later on Motzei Shabbos. But their primary agenda is not for Motzei Shabbos. You can't put the detergent in the dishwasher on Shabbos, obviously, because then everybody knows why you're doing that. But you just want the dishes out of the way. But 1 second, the dishwasher is also muksa. You can't open and close dishwashers on this muksa. The answer is the same answer. It's a keli shemalachta le'issa. It's a kli, which is designed for a purpose that you can't do on Shabbos, and therefore your heter to move it is always if it's A, in the way, or B, you need to use it for something permitted. So the dishwasher door is in the way because I need to get into the dishwasher. So of course I can open the door to get into the space of the dishwasher. So now I put my dishes in. So now the dishwasher door is sitting out in the middle of my kitchen floor. It's in the way, so I can close it. It's and it's not a radical heter. This is a straightforward heter. You can always move that level of muksa if it's in the way. Don't forget, a lot of things are more muksa than this. Like I said, a rock is much more muksa on Shabbos than a pen, because a rock has not been prepared in any way for Shabbos. It's just a raw material, if you like. An animal is much more muksa than a pen. And something which is very valuable, let's say a laptop computer, is more muksa than a pen because it has a certain different higher level muksa status, and therefore you can't just move a laptop if it's in the way. I'm not getting into that now. That's already beyond today's shir. And therefore there will be many heterim to wash the dishes if they are smelly or dirty, etc., if you don't want them around the house. And I just brought you at the top of page 3 before we get into the home help section of the shir. Yes?
I didn't quite get it. I'm allowed to put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You should be careful not to sort them, meaning if you're one of those people that likes to have all the knives in one rack and all the forks in one rack and all the spoons in one rack, so then that's boreh, then that's a problem. And you might just have to forego that certain kind of hakpada on Shabbos. And you can sort things around if you need the room, but not to have them in different types. Yes?
I thought it depended also on that you normally all week long keep your dishes in.
So that's a good question. There is a pasuk that says you can only put dishes into the dishwasher if that's what you normally do during the week. Normally on a Wednesday, when you bring your dishes off the table, you put them in the dishwasher, so then you can say, well, that's what I'm doing on Shabbos. But if the only time you do that on Shabbos is because it's Motzei Shabbos, then you're giving away. So there are poskim definitely that say that. So our problem in our house is that we only use the dishwasher for the Shabbos dishes. We don't use the dishwasher during the week. We go back to the ishwasher during the week, okay? So what's going to be then? So I would have thought that it's a lot less tircha to put the dishes in the dishwasher than to have to wash them all up. Meaning if I'm going to either wash them, take half an hour washing them, or take 5 minutes just shoving them in the dishwasher, then even though I don't do that during the week, because I don't use it at all during the week, I would have thought that's going to be right. So top of page 3, I brought you a few other halachic issues to be aware of. Regular sponges and cloths, obviously, everyone knows is not okay on Shabbos. You used to get these scrubby things that didn't really work. Now you can get these Shabbos-friendly sponge things, which I like showing this to people. My Shabbos sponges have more hechsherim on them than the food that I scrub with them. And I just find this amazing. They've got like 6 shame. Look, this is mahadrin, mahadrin. And it's a good point. They don't retain water. You can use them. And therefore, I would go with that. Solid soap is also on Shabbos. I don't think anyone uses solid soap to wash dishes with. Liquid detergents can be used, obviously. Then you have the question, which again, I'm not going to spend too much time on, is how liquid is liquid? And okay, something is not solid, but if it's blobby or viscous in some way, how do you deal with Hilchos Shabbos without having to have a viscometer or whatever they call, which you wouldn't be able to use on Shabbos anyway? Rav Moshe Feinstein, interestingly, was very machmir on liquids. People are always into Rav Moshe's coolers, I'm going to drink, Chalav Stam because Rav Moshe Feinstein. He had a few chumras as well, and one of them was on liquid detergents. He held that most liquid detergents that come out of the what do you call it, the bottle, are not runny enough to be mutter on Shabbos, and he wanted you to thin them down before Shabbos. And people do that. People do take their liquid soaps and make them even more liquidy, or the liquid detergents, but he accepts that most poskim don't hold by that, and they do use the liquid stuff. One of the tests that I've been told is a good test on Shabbos is if you, do it before Shabbos to check it out. If you pour the liquid on a surface and it kind of spreads out, then you know it's liquidy. If it sort of hangs together in a blob, then you know it's not. But most people use regular detergent. I use Fairy Liquid or whatever it's called on Shabbos to wash the dishes. Yes?
Representative Feinstein washed dishes Friday night.
Yes, she did, but what kind of detergent did she use? So that's the question. No, for sure, Rav Moshe says you can wash the dishes Friday night. And that's interesting. We have personal aiders that Rebbetzin Feinstein wash the dishes. I'd just be interested in what detergent she used, because that's the point here. Answers on a postcard, please. Yeah, they did. Sure they did. Okay, I'm young. Well, how did they wash the dishes in the 1950s?
A blue and a red that said kasher.
A blue soap and a red soap. Okay. Back in the day, people used to be into the kashrus of the soaps because some people made soaps from animal fats as well. So I remember when you used to buy kosher soap in the store. Okay. Another point which I think is well known is using hot water. Using hot water from a regular boiler system is not allowed on Shabbos. Yontif is a different question. I'm not going there. Many boiler systems today are instant hot water. That's how ours is at home, which is even more of a problem because then when you lift up the tap, you may not hear it, but it starts up the boiler and it starts the whole system, which is a big problem. But even if it's not instant, the way a regular boiler system works is in the old-fashioned boilers, you have an electric or a gas boiler or an immersion boiler. So you open up the hot tap, and hot water comes out, which has been preheated. That water's not a problem because that was heated before Shabbos. But then cold water runs in. Obviously, there's a system. It has to refill as it empties, otherwise the whole thing's going to explode. It refills with cold water. That cold water goes into your immersion system, and that really is bishul on Shabbos. Because everyone agrees, the Gemara is quite clear, bishul is not just something you're going to eat. It's even relevant to dyes or other kind of non-edible things. In fact, bishul in the original Mishkan, we learned cooking, the malacha of cooking in the Mishkan from the dyes that they made in order to dye the curtains. They didn't have any food cooking when they were creating the Mishkan. They had bread when they were running the Mishkan, but they didn't have any food cooking, preparing the Mishkan, and therefore it definitely would apply. And your cold water is in a hot water boiler being heated up in a kli rishon, sometimes with a flame on. That's mamash bishul on Shabbos. So you can't use a hot water tap from a regular system. However, in Israel, you'll all be thinking we use a dud shemesh system. And indeed, that's what we have during the summer when it's sunny. We use it from a dud shemesh. Can you use your hot water from a dud shemesh or not? And that's a whole share, which I'm not getting into. Most poskim say no, except if somebody is sick. Let's say somebody needs to take a shower because they're not well, they have a fever, or to bath small children, maybe yes. But for the regular dishes, most poskim say no. Other poskim say yes, saying this water is heated by the sun, it's not also to use, and therefore you're allowed to use it. The poskim who are machmir want to say it's not heated by the sun, it's toldat shemesh. It's heated by something which is itself heated by the sun, and that's usually an Issa D'Rabbanon, unless there's a chayla, and obviously washing your dishes is not for a sick person, and therefore most poskim will say no, but I do know that some say yes. A couple of other little things, little sink drain things in the bottom of the sink that catch all the garbage before, you can certainly use those on Shabbos. You're going to say, well, it's boireh, you're separating. No, you're not. You're separating garbage from garbage. Nothing is going to be used at the end of it. You're not using the stuff that got left in the thing for any purpose. You're throwing it straight away. And you're not using the water in the sink that's been separated, the garbage out for anything. You're throwing that straight away. Everything is going down the plug hole. Therefore, fine. And I mentioned the dishwasher as well. That's fine. Okay, good. Let's say that you're going up in the world a little bit and you say, you know something, I'm not doing any menial tasks on Shabbos. We have a lady that comes in to help, or a gentleman, let's not be sexist. Someone that comes in, a housekeeper, washes our dishes for us on Shabbos. What about that? That sounds like a great way of doing things. And even though I don't see that so much in Israel, I see it all the time in Chutz La'aretz. When you go to Chutz La'aretz, forget about South Africa, where nobody knows what washing dishes really means at all. But even in America, there's usually when I go to someone on Shabbos, there's a home help, there's a housekeeper that comes in and she does stuff and she does this and she puts this away, and magically the house is all beautiful, as you go through Shabbos. And often these people are entertaining many people. Okay, we also entertain a lot of people. We don't usually have a housemaid, but a lot of those people do. Yeah, a lot of carers. We'll get to carers in a minute, because people have carers not to wash the dishes specifically, or they might also do that, but they have carers to look after people who are usually, by definition, people who are sick. People who are well don't need carers, and therefore the halachic problems just melt away there, because everything you're doing is for a person who is a choleh. Okay, maybe not dangerously sick, hopefully, but a choleh she'ein bo sakana. There for sure you can ask a non-Jew to do anything you like for the choleh, but for the dishes is different. Do a bit of extra stuff. Yeah.
Even the sick person doesn't eat. He's just walking.
Yeah, fine. So we'll talk about that now. So let's have a look at that. Asking, and this is very good chazara, because it comes up in many situations. One of the challenges of living in Israel, there are way more benefits than challenges. But one of the challenges of living in Israel is that when you really need a non-Jew on Shabbos to help you out, it's really hard to find one. It was hard enough in Hendon, when we used to live in Hendon, when I used to have to occasionally find people to come and do stuff in the shul, and half the people I thought were not Jewish were really Jewish, and came in and turned on the fans and then said, "Good Shabbos," or something like that, which was a little bit annoying. But in Israel, it's almost impossible. In certain more Haredi areas, they actually have card-carrying Mahadrin non-Jews with a sign and a card, who have been checked out by the VAD and are Mahadrin non-Jews. So if you ever had a concern, like, how do I know that you're a non-Jew? Whip out the card. Here you are, sir. Here's my Mahadrin non-Jewish status. Actually, that's not such a silly idea. It's a pretty good idea. But how does it work? So number 11, says the Gemara on Shabbos, Maskiv la Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi raises an objection on one particular point. Amira lenochri shvutz. Shvutz is the name, the terminology for a rabbinic prohibition on Shabbos that's got something to do with like a offense against doing malacha. Meaning there's a malacha, which is a Torah prohibition, and the rabbis instituted a shvutz. It's the special name for that fence. It has a special status of itself, and actually is more serious in halacha, more machmir, more chamor than a regular drabanon in many ways. Normally speaking, with rabbanons, the rabbis are not allowed to make a fence around a fence. Yeah, they can't say you can't eat chicken with milk in case you eat beef with milk, and then later say, you know something, you can't even eat fish with milk in case you eat chicken with milk, in case you eat beef. You can't do that. The rabbis can do one fence and one fence only, with exceptions. Shvus is one of them, because Shvus has almost like a Torah status in some ways, but and therefore they can make another geder around that. But in essence, it's a drabanon. So what does that mean? There are 4 ways to understand. Why can't I just ask a non-Jew, please do this for me on Shabbos? So let's have a look. Number 12. The pasuk says as follows: "Ubiyom rishon mikra kodesh, biyom shvi mikra kodesh yelachem, kol malacha lo yeaseh." It doesn't just say lo tasu. It says lo yeaseh. There may not be malacha even done for you. And Rashi immediately jumps in there and says lo yeaseh bahem in number 12. Afilu al yidei acherim. Even by other people. Now, which other people? Obviously not your other Jews. Other Jews are bound themselves to keep Shabbos. Not your children, because your children, remember when you make Kiddush, lo tasu kol malacha, ata, uvincha, v'techa, avdecha, v'amatcha, v'imtecha, v'gercha, v'gercha, v'imtecha, v'kol b'sharecha. So there's a whole list of people who definitely I can't, on a Torah level, I can't ask. I can't ask my kids, I can't ask my maid, my even non-Jewish maid. I'm responsible for them. I can't ask my leave aside non-Jewish maid, Jewish maid for sure. I can't ask my animals to do things on Shabbos. Your animals can't work for you on Shabbos. Non-Jewish ger toshav. Interesting, not everybody knows this. If you had such a thing as a ger toshav, non-Jews who keep the Sheva mitzvahs and live in Eretz Yisrael with the Jews, on a Torah level, you can't ask them to do malacha for you on Shabbos. So it's not talking about any of those people. So who's it talking about? A regular non-Jew. Have a look on top of page 4, number 13. Says the Ramban. The Ramban, of course, lived in Spain. Ubevadai, and then he moved to Israel. Bevadai hi asmachta ba'alma. When we say that Amira la'akum, asking a non-Jew on Shabbos is a prohibition, it's a rabbinic prohibition. It's for sure. Even it's a lo ye'aseh, there's a pasuk which hints to it. The prohibition is clearly rabbinic. Asmachta ba'alma, sheba'u la'asor medivreihem, the rabbis came to prohibit it, amira b'malacha shalanu, melechet shalanu. Uvesamchu oseh lemikra hazeh, and they hooked it on to this pasuk. But the rabbi said not to do it. It's clearly a prohibition, even though it is connected to this pasuk, it is clearly rabbinic. But then he says, but if the non-Jew wants to do malacha for himself, mutter, then he can do or she can do what she likes, and we'll see, you can even use that as well. If a non-Jewish housekeeper turned on a light for herself to go in a room and the light's still on, then of course you can use that light. She didn't do it for you, she did it for herself. Okay, if she did it for you, we'll see it's different. Fine, so there's a posik. Even though it's a drabanon, it's connected with that posik. Rashi, number 14. Rashi says, Kevin the Zivnikania. So he says as follows: Yisrael, why is a non-Jew not allowed to say to a Jew not allowed to say to a non-Jew, Aseli kach, do this for me on Shabbos? Zeu mishum mimsayim bechevtzecha v'daber davar. What's that? That's a posik in Yeshaya. There are psukim in Yeshaya, I'll read you the psukim now, which are the mitzvahs of Einik Shabbos, Koved Shabbos, that you can't speak on Shabbos the way you speak in a normal way. Have a look in number 15. Says Yeshayahu, Im tashiv mishabbos raglecha. Many people read this for Kiddush on Shabbos morning. If you refrain from doing all the work you need to do, on all the business you need to do, lazos b'chetza b'yom kodshi, karata l'Shabbos oneg, and you have this oneg Shabbos, okay, likdosh l'Hashem mechubad v'chibadeto ma'asod derachecha, and you don't do your normal thing on Shabbos, mimtso chefzecha, and use your normal utensils on Shabbos, that's the roots of muksa, v'daber davar, and speak in the normal way that you speak during the week, as tizaneg el Hashem, etc., then you will get this big bracha, and we will get a lot of connection with Hashem through keeping Shabbos. So daber dava, you're not allowed to speak on Shabbos the way that you normally speak during the week, and therefore you're not allowed to speak about malacha. Look at the Rambam, number 16. Asur lamar lagoy. You're not allowed to say to a non-Jew, la'asot lanu malacha, do this malacha for us b'Shabbos. V'afal pi she'einu mitzaveh al Shabbos. Even though you don't tell him on Shabbos, even though you tell him on Friday. You're not allowed to tell on Friday, a non-Jew, saying, tomorrow morning, I'm not going to mention it tomorrow, but tomorrow morning, do this for me. You can't do that. Even though you told him early on. You're not even allowed to ask a non-Jew on Shabbos, please do this for me on Sunday. Because you're not allowed to talk about malacha. You're not allowed to organize or arrange malacha. And then he says, this is a rabbinic prohibition, says the Rambam. And then he gives a slightly different spin, which is very important. We don't want Shabbos to become kal, like less Shabbostic. And then eventually we'll just say, you know something, I'll just do it myself. You're so used to all this stuff happening around you every Shabbos. Shabbos just begins to feel like Wednesday. Because the non-Jew does this, they turn the lights on, they make the breakfast, they make the lunch, they make your coffee, they turn on your lights, they turn on your computer, they type your letters, and then all of a sudden Shabbos is just into a complete weekday, and there's no special nature to Shabbos. Yes?
How do you handle an elevator for somebody who has a walk-up or a...
That's a very good question. Okay, good.
A non-Jew in the house.
So if there's that we're going to get to that in a minute, but if there's someone who is unable to go up the floors, then that person is a chole she'ein bo sakana. They're not life-threateningly sick, but they're unable to function in the way that a regular healthy person functions. Once a person is in that situation, then of course they can ask a non-Jew to do something for them on Shabbos. Yeah. We're not talking about a choleh. Just like Miriam said, once you're dealing with a caregiver, dealing with someone who's sick, none of this applies. But I'm not dealing with that. Let's say, what about if you're in New York? Forget about someone who's in a wheelchair. And you're going somewhere on the 9th floor. Yeah? And there's a non-Jewish guy there, stands in the elevator and he presses the buttons. That's his job. He's got a little seat. He sits there all day long. There's less and less of these people every time I go to New York. But there used to be in every elevator in the Upper West Side, there was a guy, he presses the button. So what's the deal with him? You've got much less of a heter there. I mean, if he's doing it for a sick person or someone who can't walk, fine. If he's doing it because you don't want to walk up 9 floors. Now, if you think walking up 9 floors, you'll need a defibrillator when you get to the top, okay, fine. Fine, you're going to ask him to press the button. But if that's not the case, then you should walk. But it depends on the individual, and I'm not getting into all that now. Of course, some people live on the 25th floor or the 85th floor. That's nothing to talk about. You can't walk up 25 flights. But you will be a choyle by the time you get there. However, I want to mention this now, Rav Moshe Feinstein, and I want to flag this in advance. Number 17, you could do some homework on reading this, because I'm going to look at this properly next week. Number 17 is a famous psak of Rav Moshe, and he says, you see the Rambam, you're not allowed to have your Shabbos turn into a weekday by getting the non-Jew to do something. That's why it's also, because eventually you'll just lose respect for Shabbos. He says, I think the timers are included in that prohibition. Because if you have a Shabbos timer, then effectively you can have everything on a timer. You could have your food on a timer, and your lights on a timer, and your radio on a timer, and everything's on a timer. And he says, I think it could be that Chazal even included that. Obviously, they didn't know about timers. But they said anything that will make your Shabbos, like in a weekday feel, is prohibited. He says, in fact, I think timers is even worse than a non-Jew. You can't ask a non-Jew on Friday to do something for you on Shabbos. That's Amira. With a timer, it's not that you ask, you actually set it up yourself. You actually plug it in, turn it on, set the dial. He said, that's better than saying to a non-Jew? That's worse than saying to a non-Jew. Because you actually set it up. Why? It's worse than saying to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos. I can't say to a non-Jew on Friday, do this for me on Shabbos, but I can program my timer. You're already looking at me in a way to say that we don't do this. And the answer is correct. Rav Moshe Feinstein, nobody follows Rav Moshe on this really. I mean, people who are maybe wedded to Rav Moshe in all areas. But this is another chumrah of Rav Moshe. He allowed it with lights. He said, what can I tell you? Lights already people are used to. Shalom, okay, fine, Shalom Bayis. And again, I'm sure that Rav Moshe would, if it's a Shalom Bayis issue, would have said it's good. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't imagine that they had air conditioners so much in the Lower East Side in the 1960s, but I suspect that Rav Moshe did not permit using an air conditioner on the timer. They did have air conditioners, and what did he paskin? Do we know? The little window ones. I don't know if he would have allowed air conditioning on a timer, but... Right. Interesting. I must tell you, even though I'm not the oldest person in the room, when I went to university for my interview to Oxford University, I walked into the room that they were putting me in overnight. None of the lights worked, and I could not work out what was going on. And I knocked, sort of timidly on the door of the student that was living next door and says, "Why don't my lights work?" And he said, "Did you put money in the meter? Because if you didn't put money in the meter, why would the lights work?" I go, "Sorry, I didn't think about that. Let's put money in the meter to make the lights work." Okay, fine. So that's the basic principles of Amira La'akum. However, we have a lot more to say. What if you have a live-in housekeeper that's there all the time? Not just a non-Jew coming up to you and doing something on Shabbos. So let's look at this now. So let's look at the Shulchan Aruch number 18. Asur liskor po'alim. You're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos. V'loi loyme le'eni Yehudi. And you're not allowed to ask a non-Jew liskor po'alim b'Shabbos to hire workers on Shabbos, which, by the way, is a good indicator that you can't ask a non-Jew to do something which is itself the Rabbanon. Because hiring workers is Drabonon. You can't even ask a non-Jew to hire workers, so you certainly can't ask them for a Drabonon either. We'll see exceptions soon. Even though it's not for me on Shabbos, it's for later. I need a worker for Monday. You can't ask a non-Jew to hire someone. Because whatever you're not allowed to do, you can't ask a non-Jew to do. Like we saw in the Rambam, even to ask them before Shabbos, to do it on Shabbos, asur. What can you do? So here we're going to see something that a lot of people misunderstand. You can say to the non-Jew on Sunday, Lama lo asita dava ploini b'Shabbos she'avar. Why didn't you turn the lights on for me last Shabbos? You normally do. Why didn't you turn the lights on for me? That you can do on Sunday. Afal pi shemevin, even though the non-Jew understands, mitoich dvarav, from that statement, she'ritzayna she'yasena b'Shabbos ha'aba, that you want him to turn the lights on next Shabbos. That you can say. You can't say to the non-Jew on Sunday, please come in on Shabbos morning and turn on my lights. Again, I'm not talking about a caregiver to a person who is not well. That's different. The regular situation. But you can on Motzei Shabbos on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you can say, why didn't you do it last week? Yeah.
But to talk to the person that way is so critical, and wouldn't the person get all defensive and say,
We live in a world where everyone's going to get offended, whatever you say. Amy, I'm quite confident that you will find a sensitive, beautiful nusach. You won't just say, why didn't you do this to me? Like, you'll find a way to say it, okay? Because of this halacha, which is very clear, people make the mistake of thinking you can hint to a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbos. That's not true. You can hint on the weekday. That's a hint on the weekday that he should do something on Shabbos, but on Shabbos itself, you're very limited. Go over the page. I brought you some examples. Hinting in a way which contains a clear request, like everybody is going to obviously understand that's what you're asking, is not allowed on Shabbos. It's allowed on Motzei Shabbos. It's allowed on the weekday. Why didn't you turn the lights on for me last Shabbos? That's allowed. But on Shabbos, you're not allowed. That's included in V'daber Davar.
Why not on Friday if you can do it on Sunday?
What?
You can't.
Yeah, Friday as well. Yeah, why didn't you do it last Shabbos? You can't say, turn it on for me next Shabbos. Yeah, exactly. So on Shabbos, you can't hint in a way which is really an indirect request. I brought some examples. You can't say, on Shabbos, why didn't you turn off the lights last Shabbos? Do me a favor, there's not enough light in the room. Anyone who turns off the flame won't regret it. If you lower the flame, I'll reward your efforts. You know, none of those things are permitted on Shabbos. That's because you're basically telling them, do it, but you're not telling them. A hint that doesn't include a real request is permitted according to some poskim. So, for example, you could say, the alarm is beeping and we're not permitted to turn it off. The lights in the bedroom are on and we're not permitted to turn them off. It's a shame that the lights are on and electricity is being wasted. It's difficult to sleep because of the light in the room. It's a shame that the gas is going to waste. I don't have enough ripped tissues or whatever it is. So that you can say, because there's no request in there. Now, some poskim say, no, you can't even say that. The minute you say the words, and I'm not allowed to, you're one of those Meshuggah Orthodox Jews. Meaning, all you can say is something like, it's dark in here, and not, I'm not allowed to turn on the lights. Because that's just giving. Although many poskim say you can say, I'm not allowed to turn on the lights. And my experience, honestly, from many years living in Chassaretz, is if you just say it's dark in here, they're just going to look at you and say, correct? It's dark in here. They're not going to get it. If you say it's dark in here and I'm not allowed to turn on the lights, that's maybe enough to let them know what to do, but not enough to be a direct instruction or indirect instruction. The problem is, I brought you in the next little bit, often the non-Jew then turns around to you and says, so would you like me to turn on the lights then? That's what they say. And then the question is, can you say yes? Because once you say yes, then you've defeated the object. So then you have to think something to say which is, well, that would be nice, or I don't know, you'll have to work out something to say. So this applies in terms of the hinting and the speaking on Shabbos. However, and this is an important new point, there is a difference in halacha between a non-Jew that does something for you as a favor, or a non-Jew that does something even if they're being paid by the hour. That's prohibited on all that basis. They can't do things for you on Shabbos. But a non-Jew who is a contractor, what's called a kablan. We use the word kablan now in modern Hebrew for a building contractor. But in Chazal and in the halacha, kablan is used for any contractor. If I take my dry cleaning in to be cleaned, and I take it in on Friday and say I'm picking it up on Monday, that person is a kablan. They charge a fixed fee. If they get into trouble with it and it takes them 5 hours longer than they thought it would, that's their problem. That's not my problem. They're a kablan. I'm paying them a fixed fee and I'm picking it up on Monday. So then you can take stuff into non-Jews and they can do it for you on Shabbos. Because you're not working for me for paid by the hour. You're doing a fixed contractual fee. If I put my letter in the mail and it's going to be mailed on Sunday and the mail people are going to be doing it on Shabbos, That's not a problem because it's a fixed fee. I bought a stamp or whatever they do today, and it's a fixed price, and they do whatever it takes to get the letter there. And therefore, once you have a kablan, then you are in an easier situation. Have a look, please, at number 19. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Mutter liten begadav lekoves ein Yehudi. You can give your clothes to a non-Jewish dry cleaner, samach lecha shecha, even close to Friday night. Im katzatz lo damim. If it's a fixed fee, is not being paid by the hour, it's a contractor, no problem. But v'hu shelo yomela la'asot b'Shabbat. But you can't instruct them, and I want this done on Shabbos. You can give it to them and let them do it when they want. And if they do it on Shabbos, that's fine. And by the way, the poskim say that you can't give it to them 3 minutes before Shabbos and say, and I want it 3 minutes after Shabbos, because then you're effectively telling them to do it on Shabbos. But if you say, I'm picking it up whenever, and they've got time to do it when they want, and they do it on Saturday, that's not your problem at all. But you can't ask them to do it on Shabbos. And they also, you're only allowed this if they do it in their factory, in their house, in their shop. But they can't come to your house and start doing malacha in your house, even if you take them on as a contractor. Why not? The Mishnah Berurah says in number 20, because that's a zilzul Shabbat. Bebeito, number 20. Rotzaloma, shelo bebeit Yisrael. They can't do it in the Jew's house. I forgot to mention shlichut. Another of the issues of a non-Jew doing is they're doing as your shaliach on Shabbat. And if they do it in your house, it's evident to all. It's a kind of marit ayin. It's clear that it looks to people that you're having stuff done on Shabbat. Either they're going to think that's okay, or they're going to think that you're breaking Shabbat. They don't realize the arrangement. You can't do that. Because of a Chai Adam, he brings the Chai Adam, but Beis Yisrael, Asar afilu im hudava shemina kol b'nei ha'ir litno b'kablonis. Even if it's something that normal people contract and they don't pay by the hour, once it's in your house, you're not allowed to have it done because it's a zilzul Shabbat. So how does that help us? I have a housekeeper, let's say, who's works for me the whole time, and let's say she's a kablan, not a socher yom, which with a schir yom rather, which is an interesting question as to whether a housekeeper is like a contractor or not like a contractor. And I'm not going to get into that now. I gave you but let's assume that she is. Everything I want them to do is in my house. That's the point. It's not like I'm giving her dry cleaning and she's doing it in her house. She's washing my dishes, cleaning my carpets, folding my clothes, making my beds, doing all the things that need to be done in my house for me. So how does that even help me? I wouldn't be allowed to get her to do anything because it's all happening in my house. So many poskim turn around and say, you're right. A non-Jewish housekeeper does not get you anywhere because whatever you'd be allowed to do as a kablan, they can do it on their premises but not on yours. However, Rav Moshe Feinstein here has a leniency. Rav Moshe Feinstein comes along and says, if you have a live-in housekeeper, he or she is allowed to do anything that these housekeepers normally do for you that's not like a special thing. Because people will assume that that's part of their general contracts and they do it as part of their general work. So he says they're allowed to wash the dishes, the floors, even if they're washing them for after Shabbos. You don't have to say, leave it till after Shabbos. Let them do whenever they want. They'd rather take off after Shabbos than let them do it on Shabbos. They can fold the laundry. They can take out the garbage. Excuse me. They can clean the house more generally. They can turn the lights on and off. Because people, that's what their general job. You're not asking them to do that. However, you can't ask them directly. Please just turn on the lights on, please, because then you're back to where we said before, or hint to them in a way which is more direct. And they can't do anything which the Rav Moshe says goes beyond their normal responsibilities, which is the kind of thing that somebody wouldn't normally expect a housekeeper to do. Defrost the freezer is one example that's given. That's like a one-off. People don't normally do that. Go shopping for me. Go to the store. That they wouldn't be allowed to do that, but anything in their normal situation they'd be allowed to do. And also, and here's a big gray area, as long as it's not a zilzul Shabbat, that it's like a wochendik. It's like loud noise. We'll deal with noise next week. The Ashkenazim are particularly sensitive to noise on Shabbat, halachically. They don't like noisy things. The Sfaradim don't seem to mind halachically. We'll talk about where that comes from, that there's a lot of noise going on, maybe because there's a lot of noise going on anyway. But we'll see next week where that comes from. But having the non-Jew vacuum your carpets, most poskim will say, no. That's a zilzul. That's a zilzul Shabbos. Putting on a washing the clothes, and then in the middle of Shabbos, your washing machine's going, that's very noisy. What about using a dishwasher? The housekeeper says, something, I'll do the dishes, but I'm not going to stand and I'm going to use the dishwasher. Is the dishwasher noisy or not? So we're going to get to that next week. Okay, when is a dishwasher noisy and when it's not, and what do you call noisy, etc. So you actually do have, according to Rav Moshe, quite a lot of leeway with a housekeeper. A schir yom, someone coming in being paid by the hour, a cleaning person, it's no help. It's not a kablan. They're just being paid by the hour. It's like a regular non-Jew for anything. But a kablan, you are going to get some advantages there. Yes.
But if I could wash the dishes anyway, why couldn't I ask the stereo to wash them?
Well, you can ask them to wash the dishes, but the question is, what if they prefer to use the dishwasher? Do I have to stop them using the dishwasher? I can wash the dishes. I can't use the dishwasher. They can wash the dishes, but can they use the dishwasher? They say, well, it's for me. They're saying, well, it's for my benefit. To wash them. Yeah, but can they then choose to use the dishwasher? Or should you say to them, I'd rather you didn't use the dishwasher, because the dishwasher shouldn't be going on Shabbos? That's the question. Or can you just let them get on with it? Do whatever they like. We'll see. We'll see that next week. Let's go on a little bit, because even though it is a shorter sheet, we're still going to run out of time. On page number 6, I brought you the other side of Amir La'akum. Forget about what I'm allowed to ask the non-Jew on Shabbos, or hint. I'm not allowed to benefit from what a non-Jew did on Shabbos. Look at number 21. Mishnah. This is in the Mishnah. Nochri shehidlik et haner. If a non-Jew lit a little light for themselves. Mishtamish OUisrael. The Jew can use that light. They turn on the light for themselves. I can use the light. Ve'im bishvil Yisrael. But if they turned on the light for me, asur. I'm not allowed to use the light. Meaning, even if I didn't ask them. A non-Jew saw me sitting nebach in the dark. And they came in and they said, you know something, I'm going to turn the lights on for you because it's dark in here. You're not allowed to use the light. Because it's benefiting. You didn't even ask them. If the non-Jew pulls water out of the well for his horses, and there's some left at the end, so you can use the water for your animals as well. They've got to drink on Shabbos. You didn't draw it out of the well for yourself, and he didn't do it for you. But in Bishvil Yisrael, but if they did it for you, you can't even use it. So actually you end up with an interesting situation, which is that you actually cannot even benefit from something that a non-Jew does for you, even if you didn't ask them, even if that's their job. Even if the housekeeper walked in and saw you, and you never said a word, and she's your regular housekeeper, and she sees you sitting, struggling in the dark to read, because it's like, turns on the light, you can't use it. She did it for you. You can't benefit from what a non-Jew does for you on Shabbos. Now, you're all looking at me with a puzzled eye and say, well, what's the whole purpose of a Shabbos goy? You know, they lit the fires, they did this, they did that. So it's very important to understand. There's a whole page of analysis here, but the Gemara also says that if a non-Jew wants to put out a fire, I'm not talking about a dangerous, life-threatening fire, so then you can let them do what they like. You can let them put out the fire. You don't have to say, don't put out the fire, and that's okay. Oh, yeah, but you benefit from that. They put out the... What about turning off the light? So Tosfos explains, and this is the halacha, you're not allowed to benefit directly from a non-Jew. Turning on the light. I washed your shirt and ironed it for you. Here's your shirt. You can't wear the shirt. But if the non-Jew did something which is not a direct benefit, it's an indirect benefit, something's in the way, and they took away the problem, and now I can do something else, that's not called a direct benefit. If a non-Jew turns off the light, I can use the dark room to go to sleep. Oh, I'm using the turned off light? No, I'm not. I'm not using the turned off light. There's just not a light there because they turned it off. And therefore you can do that. When we were in Poland many years ago, so there were non-Jews opening the doors for us with the electric key cards. So are you allowed to go in the room? The non-Jew opened the door for you. Yeah, because all the non-Jew did is take away something that's stopping you getting in the room. When I'm sitting in the room, I'm not using the opened door. And there's a very important difference between those two things, and therefore you have to ask yourself what is prohibited to benefit from, what isn't prohibited to benefit from, and go on that basis. Again, when you're dealing with somebody who is a chayla, it's quite different. It's not the same thing at all, and the non-Jew is definitely allowed to do that to you as well. And that was the origin of the Shabbos goy with the fire. If you lived in Eastern Europe and there was no fire, and your kids are sitting shivering and freezing in the house, someone catches a chill, it could be a real life-threatening issue. They didn't have antibiotics, somebody catches the flu, and that may be the end. So you could ask the non-Jew to light the fire, or hint at whatever, and you could use the fire because that was considered to be an essential benefit, otherwise you're a real chayla. So you really have to navigate around these things on Shabbos. So let's just finish off on page 7. I'll give you the last few bits and pieces. Therefore, having a housekeeper is definitely better than having a visiting cleaner. But even a visiting cleaner, which is no different, even if you pay them than a regular non-Jew doing something, there are still some leniencies. And one of the main ones is, whatever they do for themselves to make it easy for themselves, then you don't care about. Meaning you ask the non-Jew to wash the dishes. Fine, you could wash the dishes. They can wash the dishes, but they choose to use a sponge. Fine, what do you care? Let them use a sponge. They choose to use the hot water. Yeah, fine, what do you care? They're doing it completely for their own convenience. They could wash it with cold water. You do, but they don't want to. That's no problem at all. You tell them to clean the floors. They could do it in a way which is Shabbos friendly, but they prefer to use a squeegee and a mop and do the... Fine. They're doing it for themselves. They're completely doing it for their own benefit. There's no problem. The Taz has a case in number 28 where a non-Jew turns on the light to be able to wash the dishes. So that's fine. Let them turn on the light. You can even wash the dishes with them, and you can even use the light afterwards. It's fine, because they did it for themselves. They didn't do it for you. And I brought you at the end here some examples where you are allowed to ask non-Jews directly and benefit from it. And this is very interesting, and it takes us a little bit beyond. But you're allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a rabbinic prohibition for many situations. For a mitzvah, for a necessity, for a serious monetary loss. Are you allowed to ask a non-Jew to wheel somebody in a wheelchair where there's no Eruv for them to get to shul? Are you allowed to do that? So the most person will say, well, you are allowed to do that because it's a mitzvah for them to go to shul. Because, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan to wheel them through the street. You're asking a non-Jew to do an Issa D'Rabbanan for the purpose of a mitzvah. It's mutter. We had a big machloikis in London many years ago before the Eruv. There was a Rav who said you can wheel a man to shul because he's got a mitzvah to daven with a minyan, but you can't wheel a woman to shul because she can daven at home. And other posting were very unhappy with that and said, no. It's also a mitzvah for her to go to shul. She likes shul. She likes being in shul. It's not the same exactly as a man for a minyan, but it's still a mitzvah, and therefore there were the poskim who did allow it and the poskim who didn't allow it, but you can look at that yourself. Next week, we get into the much more, I think, technical and actually more exciting waters of, hopefully not water with your time switch, but turning on your time switch and changing your time switch, adjusting time switches, etc., and getting into the dishwasher case, the coffee machine case, and many others as well. Shabbos alarms. What about having an alarm set to go off and wake you up on Shabbos morning? Is that okay? Is that phone alarms? Okay, we'll get there next week, please God.